Hello, and welcome to Beyond Bereavement, the Power of Planning. My name is Beatrice Tony Bailey, and I am your television host and the author of the book, Farewell, My Friend. Farewell, My Friend was written as a result of the many lessons I learned while taking care of my late husband. I found out during this very stressful time that it's not a matter of if a person's going to have to deal with these end-of-life issues, but when and who. Beyond Bereavement, the Power of Planning is a collaborative effort between the Interfaith Service Bureau and its television station, RCC TV, and Eastline Memorial Park. It's the desire of these organizations that Beyond Bereavement, the Power of Planning, function as a platform for interactive discussions between the various faith communities. Won't you join us? Good evening, and my name is Beatrice Bailey, and I'm your host of Beyond Bereavement, the Power of Planning. Tonight's episode deals with hospice, and when I was back in Iowa, Davenport, Iowa, where I'm from, giving a presentation to the Clarissa Cook Hospice Facility, they had a wonderful inscription on the wall. It said, "Hospice adds life to your days when no more days can be added to your life." And I was deeply moved by that. And in our studio this afternoon, we have three wonderful people, and they're going to introduce themselves. I have Mary Kaye Walters-Perez. It's a lot of names, it's a lot of woman. She is with First Call. We have Charley Blatchford, who was very integral in our journey with hospice. And we have Heron, who's also with Visiting Angels, and she was intimate in our relationship with hospice when my husband died. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about what I know about hospice. When I give my different presentations to the various hospice groups, I always tease them, and I said, "Oh yeah, you're the people that come around, then people die, right?" And they kind of chuckle, and they go, "Well, not really." But hospice is a wonderful organization. I knew nothing about it, and I think there's a lot of you that know very little about it. To tell you how I became familiar with hospice, when my husband was given a diagnosis that he had terminal cancer and had 6 to 12 months to live, we had long-term health care. So with long-term health care, we were able to get an aide in the home, and that's where Karen will come in. She'll tell you a little bit about her organization. Well, when we were talking about going to hospice, my husband, who was a very well-read person, very well-traveled person, was adamant against hospice. He wanted nothing to do with hospice. I could do nothing to talk him into it. So I was very distressed about it. And so as a result, I went and worked with my trainer. Charley and I happen to have the same trainer, Jake Tantarelli, who beats us up unmercifully at the gym, and then we give him money to do that. I don't know what that's all about. But Jake was very aware of the fact that Rick did not want to go to hospice, and that was very stressful to our family unit. So there's no accidents. I mean, an accident is when, God chooses to remain anonymous. So at any rate, Charley works out right before I do with Jake. So Jake told Charley about the story. So Jake had Charley come and talk to me, and Charley said, "Would you mind, could I go and speak with Rick?" And so I said, "Well, I'll find out." So I talked to Rick, and I said, "Charley is with hospice, he's a volunteer. Would you mind talking to him?" He goes, "Well, fine, send him over." So Charley came over in a day or so, and I sat there and I was knitting like a crazy woman, because I knit an awful lot during this time, and we had tea, and Charley was able to explain to him about the hospice program. What I didn't know at that time, and this is why it's important for you to discuss these things with those who are ill, is that all his knowledge around hospice had to do with facilities. He said, if I'm going to die, I want to die in my own home. So that's a personal example of misinformation out there about hospice. But now I'm going to turn the show over to our guests. Mary Kaye, you're with First Call, and tell me a little bit about your background.
I'm a social worker by profession, and I've been working in the hospice field for about 14 years now. I started actually back in Maryland, and then to San Diego, and then to the Sacramento area. So great love and respect. It all began when I cared for my mother, and she said, "Mary Kaye, I think you're really good at this. You should do this for a living." And so I went on into the field and got my master's degree, and here I am today.
Because it takes a unique personality in order to deal with death day in and day out. But if we're going to talk about the hospice process. The first person I want to talk to that got me into hospice, Charley, you got me into hospice. I guess Rick got me into hospice, but Charley, tell us a little bit about your background. I'll tell you a joke about Charley. He is such a wonderful man. Jake, our trainer, we say that if Charley were a priest, none of us would ever sin because we wouldn't want to disappoint Charley. So, with that having been said, this is Dr. Charley Blatchford from Yale University, and a heck of a wonderful guy. So tell us how you became involved with.
I'm not a medical doctor.
But you are to me.
I'm a volunteer, and a volunteer in hospice is a part of a team that works with the patient and the family. I think that's very important. The team consists of a medical doctor, a nurse, a social worker, a chaplain, sometimes a nutritionist, or usually a nutritionist, I guess, and others. As a volunteer, I agree to be with the family in whatever capacity is necessary.
Well, what'd you do? Wake up one morning and say, you know what? I think I'll be a hospice volunteer. I mean, how'd you come to this?
Oh, well, my two sisters were involved in hospice in different ways. My elder sister was a nursing instructor, and I think she first learned of hospice through a visit from an English nurse at Yale School of Nursing. Mm-hmm. And she became instrumental in founding the Hospice of Delaware. Ah. My other sister happened to be in, as a patient, the palliative care unit in a hospital in Vancouver, BC.
So for those that don't know what palliative care is, tell us what that is.
It's another word for comfort care, mm-hmm. and that's a term that I think is coming into use more.
Now, what do you mean by comfort care?
Well, rather than subjecting oneself to the painful medications of chemotherapy and or radiation, a patient may choose to not undergo that treatment and say, I just want to die naturally. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult sometimes for a patient to get to that stage.
Difficult in what regard?
They feel maybe that they are just giving up, mm-hmm. until they swing around and see that hospice can provide the best kind of quality of care at the end mm-hmm. of life.
Well, I think you said prepare, but I think also prepare the family, because what my experience is that hospice really supported our family unit, because after the nurse would come in and talk to Rick, or the social worker, they immediately would take me into the kitchen to check in to find out, how are you doing, B? So it was a tremendous amount of support. So, yeah. So you decided, I think I want to do this.
Yes, and most people say, how can you do that? Mm-hmm. Because we're all, as a society, so afraid of death. Mm-hmm. I don't know, I guess I'm strange.
Well, you know what, if you're strange, you're in good company. Very good, very good. Karen, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background.
Thank you, Bea. Thank you for having me here. Mm-hmm. I'm a registered nurse by profession for 20 years, and I've worked in hospice now. I work as a hospice nurse as well as run a business called Visiting Angels. I've done hospice nursing for over 10 years, and I just truly have a love for assisting families, as you said, with a patient, as well as all of the family members or loved ones involved in their care. And what we do with our service, when I work with my Visiting Angels services.
Well, let me interrupt for a second. Let me tell you how I even got Visiting Angels. My husband, once he was diagnosed being terminal and all that, they gave us a list of different providers. I don't know, they had this company, that company, that company, and there was Visiting Angels. And I thought, you know what? With what we're going through, we need all the angels we can get to come to our house. So I'm a very organized person. I'm a very, not control-oriented, but I'm very control oriented, and I wasn't, all right, admit it, all right, I am. But I wasn't crazy about having a lot of different people coming into my house, you know, I mean, are they gonna rip you off? Are they gonna be whatever? I mean, I just didn't want to lose that amount of control. So at any rate, I said, you know what, Lord, I'm gonna pray over this. So I prayed over this. I said, I'm gonna call these angel people. So in the door comes this, obviously very attractive little lady, and she came in and she smiled. She says, I know you. I know your husband. We used to attend the same church. Now, call that an accident if you want. It wasn't an accident. It was an answer to prayer. I immediately relaxed because I already had a relationship with her, and I also knew that she was a believer. So that's my Karen story.
Thank you.
So now, to tell them what visiting angels do,
So
other than flap around with your wings and that.
In our angels, we send, we're in-home care service, and what we do is we send out care providers that are able to come into the home and assist patients and their families. And one of the things I think that makes our service very special is that it's very important to try to find the right match for families. Try to have care providers that will fit in and can offer support to the family during a very hard time and to the patient. So we take a lot of consideration and time in making that match.
Yeah, she interviewed us before she took us on as a client. She absolutely interviewed us.
And every single patient, you can't take shortcuts in that sense. But interviewing the client to find out what their needs are, find out what their fears are, and seeing how we can best support the family. And then after that point, we're able to look at our pool of patients or care providers and look at who we think would best meet their needs.
And I have a personal observation of that. We had a couple, 3 different people that we had in before we actually found the right fit. One lady was absolutely phenomenal. I learned an awful lot about how to take his blood pressure, his vital signs, you know, look for this, look for that, look for that. She was wonderful, but she had a larger than life personality. And my husband, now remember, was very laid back, very low key. I was the crazy person in the crazier person in the house, but I'm a big personality. He was pretty cool, pretty laid back. Well, this lady would come in with this big bombastic voice, Mr. Bailey, good morning, wake up, how are you doing? He'd go, oh, I'm quietly trying to die here. This is just too much. He says, B, you need to fix it. So, I mean, what do? You have options. I called Karen. I said, this other woman is wonderful. I do enjoy her. I said, but she's just too high octane for Rick. She's not a problem. And then she brought on Lucretia, who was just wonderful. She'd come in, pat his hand and say, good morning, Mr. Bailey. How are you, Mr. Bailey? I'll be sitting right here if you need me, Mr. Bailey. You know, so she had a really wonderful, soft, even personality. And it was wonderful. And she'd always end the day by saying, okay, Mr. Bailey, see you tomorrow, Mr. Bailey. And then the last day she was there, he said, no, you won't see me tomorrow. So it was wonderful. But she worked with us to get the right personnel in there. Now tell us, who started hospice? I mean, where'd that come from?
Well, there
Anyone?
A remarkable woman by the name of Dame Cicely Saunders from London, England. Fantastic woman. I believe she started out as a social worker, then she became a nurse, and ultimately a physician.
The expression that I use, hospice adds days to your life and life to your days, but no more days can be added to your life. I think it was her.
Yes. And this was in 1967, she started the first hospice at St. Christopher's outside of London. And then she met up with another remarkable woman, Florence Wald, who was the Dean of Nursing from Yale University.
Wow.
And they did an exchange program, if you will. And then the first hospice was started in Connecticut. Just an incredible endeavor. And so through time, things have evolved, and now, of course, Medicare is an entitlement program, and Part A covers a lot of the benefits that are used for hospice, and we'll go into that a little bit later, I know, but it's just an incredible program, how it's evolved over the decades, and where we've come today to have over 3,000 hospices in the United States, and more than 175 in the state of California, and about 10 to 13 here in this greater Sacramento area.
Wow. Now, don't
Really
the hospice personnel, like nurses, don't you have to take additional training or something to do hospice?
Yes.
Now, what does that entail?
Yes. It entails taking some courses and so that you can specialize in the area. It's a very specialized area as far as the pain management issues and different treatment options that you offer patients. So it's a very specialized area and usually takes about, I remember having to take a specific test that you get certified in that field.
Because that would be tough. I mean, certainly I had my hospice journey, but just to do that day in and day out, it would take a special personality to do it.
Hospice nurses, I have found, are some of the most caring people. From a volunteer's point of view, I just enjoyed very much being in a home when the hospice nurse happened to make her call. And just to observe the care that a hospice nurse is able to give, to spend the time with the patient, to get to know the patient, compared with the busyness and the ringing of buzzers and bells that are on a hospital ward, as a comparison. And I think there's a special extra dose of caring that hospice nurses have. Marvelous, marvelous people.
No, are they selected or do they volunteer?
You volunteer.
Okay.
It's definitely something you volunteer, but I think
Apply for a job.
As far as applying, and of course you want to go into an area that you are interested in. But I think, as you said, I think one of the prerequisites for being a hospice nurse is having a comfort level or understanding and with death yourself. You can't really help others unless you have a certain level of comfort in yourself and how to deal with it. So I think that's I've in my training, in addition to the additional training that we need, is I guess I don't look at it the way other people look at death.
How do you look at death?
It doesn't have to be a negative experience. It could be a wonderful experience for families. It could be a time to pull everybody together, and it could be a time of forgiveness. It could be a time to share and love and look at past and appreciate where you are today, because we only have today. And so being able to talk to families about that and slow down and let's smell the flowers and enjoy the air and the sky and all of the things that we neglect in our busy lives. Those are the type of things that we're able to talk to families about. And so a lot of it is counseling. You mentioned that the founder was a social worker and nurse.
Yes.
You'll find that very common because it is the type of business where you're doing a lot of talking and listening. And
hopefully more listening than talking on
Yes.
many occasions. Social workers are now being certified for hospice as well through the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. So it's another opportunity to get the specialized care and knowledge that you want to be able to provide the support that you need for the patient and the family.
Dealing with this, all three of you, on a day-to-day basis, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the program later, but how do you keep yourself up? I mean, if you're really crazy about June and Gary Smith, and then Gary dies, I mean, I would think it'd be hard just to flip the page and go, oh, well, Gary's gone, let's move on to the next one. I mean, how do you not internalize those many losses that you have to deal with?
Well, I think you seek support from your colleagues. There are chaplains at every agency, spiritual care providers, and a good agency will have a mechanism in place for you to be able to have an outlet to demonstrate your grief. IDG is a perfect, it's an interdisciplinary group meeting that you have every week or every 2 weeks, and that's an opportunity for the team members to discuss that patient and that family and what was significant to you about them and your experience, and then hopefully be able to relay that information to the bereavement program, which is another integral part of the team, and be able to help what you know and what you've experienced with that patient and family to help that loved one who's surviving to move on and get the kind of extra support that they need to go on to a new way of life without their loved one.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I agree. When I was doing hospice, we had a lot of support from our colleagues. We had a chaplain, and we had different. We had a time where we had all gone to a resort and spent a day talking and just reflecting and just kind of debriefing. It's hard to not have it in your heart or take it personal. We're all human, but having a team that understands that and all working together provided a lot of support, and it gives us a lot of extra energy to keep moving forward.
And a service of remembrance. A lot of agencies, such as First Call, has an annual event where they have a candle lighting ceremony, or to read off the names, or have an opportunity with the staff
I've attended
to
a couple of
reacquaint.
those, yes. And they're very moving.
Very, very
Yeah.
moving. Wonderful. And that's another opportunity for staff to be able to deal with some of the sadness that they may experience dealing with loved ones. But as well, I think a healthy hospice employee has other things that they do in their life, whether it's gardening, bike riding, sailing, kayaking, whatever it is, that they have an opportunity to do something different in their life that takes them away from their work.
Well, now, what's the faith base of these particular individuals? Are there a lot of them, are they people of faith?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily?
Yeah.
They can be of any faith.
But I'm saying, but are they believers? Do they believe in something? Do they believe in a higher power? And does that sustain them as well?
Some don't.
I think it's all very individually based.
I agree.
And one of the most important things, though, is whatever we believe as hospice employees, volunteers, that we don't try to extend our belief onto the patient and family, that we allow them to move in whatever direction they feel they want to, because it's a very self-determined program. A lot of autonomy comes with hospice, and it's not what we think or feel, but we're trying to define what it is they think or feel and have them move to that place.
Support them in the way they need to be supported.
Absolutely.
I think that what Karen was implying too is the relationship with the family depends upon the length of time that you have gotten to know them. And one of the shortcomings of many people who come into hospice is that they have waited until the last minute to get help from hospice. I had a family for whom I was volunteering for about 4 months or so, and I really got to know them, and they got to know me, and but not as so much the volunteer, but they got to know the whole team, and the team could serve them in such a positive way that a family that is in for 2 days does not. There's a terrible amount of disruption.
Exactly. We had hospice for 6 months. So our family was supported for 6 months, which I guess is atypical. And I encourage everyone that if you've reached a point where you're not going to seek additional medical care, to do hospice. They're not scary people, they're supportive people. They've dealt with families that have gone down similar paths that you're going down. And I found them, I looked forward to the meeting. I always had tea ready for them and what have you. And we just had a really wonderful time. So tell us, with the hospice program, what do you get with hospice? Again, let's go over the personnel that you would get if you sign up the hospice program.
There's a nurse, a social worker, a spiritual care provider, volunteer, hospice aide, and a medical director that oversees all of the care, as well working with the primary medical physician. And everybody works together as a team, looking at every aspect of a human being's life and trying to be able to help direct them and go wherever it is they feel like they'd like to go.
So do you guys have an interdisciplinary meeting?
Absolutely. And we talk about all of the cases, all the families, the patients, and then we also talk about who is really appropriate for service and who isn't appropriate. Sometimes people have an opportunity to graduate from service. They have really improved in their care.
Absolutely.
And so they may come off of service with the option of always coming back on should they meet particular criteria. And it's very well defined, whether it's a cancer diagnosis, Alzheimer's, other kinds of dementia, congestive heart failure, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. All of these different diagnoses have particular criteria, signs and symptoms by which an individual is judged to be appropriate for service or not. So we're constantly looking to be good stewards of the monies that come primarily from the federal government through Medicare, who's paying for all of these services, and we want to be good stewards of those dollars. So we constantly reevaluate.
Anything else?
Just to add to your list, a pharmacist is also involved.
Yes, yes.
Very important
Absolutely.
in the care. But yeah, those type of meetings do take place where appropriateness for care is being evaluated on, I think it's a 3-month intervals.
It starts 3 months, then another 3 months, and then every 60 days after that.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. It really is interesting because that's one of the aspects that Charley explained to Rick. I said, Rick, look, if you get better, even though we knew that he wasn't, you can graduate from the program. And the other thing is we went back east to have him, for lack of a better term, his swan song, to go back and to say goodbye to his family and whatever. He couldn't be in the hospice program and be traveling also because he was, so basically we got out of the program, went back to Connecticut, and got back into the program when we got back. So there are rules and regulations, but they're very, very supportive. I particularly like the pharmacy aspect because what I found out, anything that had to do with his illness was paid for and was not any kind of a charge. But you're able to get a back number to the pharmacy, you know, for me to follow up on things. And the one thing that I like so much with the program and with the hospice teams, they don't go through the 1-800 push 1 pound 3 whatever. They have all the backroom numbers. So if Artis, who was our nurse at the time, she had a question, she would just call the doctor's private line. Boom, get them just like that without, you know, leaving an email. Or I love the email process, but it was wonderful. They're able to cut through the red tape, and by them being able to cut through the red tape as quickly as they did, it really lowered the stress level. If I wanted to find out something, and you know me, I wanted to find out something, I could find it out right away. So it was wonderful.
And that's a great point that you make. I'm not sure of the other hospices in this area, but I know where I work at First Call, a human being answers the phone. In this
What a
day
concept.
of technology,
What a concept.
Yes.
it seems, at least it's one of those places that you know when you dial in and someone picks up that phone, you're really talking to a human being.
Yeah.
So,
That's
agree.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
find that most patients are very pleasantly surprised when we're
Yes.
able to call and you're on the phone with the doctor right now? Oh yes, I'm on the phone with the doctor right now. We're making changes and we're adjusting and doing things for your care. And so it's a lot faster and a lot less stress for patients and families.
And they do work closely. I can remember in Rick's situation, he had all these different pills because he was also a diabetic, and he was taking all kinds of different medications. And he was on morphine for a while, but his pain level wasn't that high, but he was looped out. I mean, he was in la-la land a lot. So I talked to the nurse. I said, is there something else we can do? I mean, he's not that much pain. And that let's try Vicodin. So we switched to Vicodin and what have you. But they work with us. You know, towards the end, he had all these different pills that he was taking. And she said, do we really need to bother with this? It just didn't make sense. This didn't make sense. So after that, I think he just took like a stool softer because, you know, Vicodin and stuff like that will give you internal issues. Real, you will be bound, for lack of a better term. But after a bit, it just didn't make sense to do all this other medication. So she checked it out with a doctor as well. Now you mentioned before, who pays for hospice? I mean, is everyone eligible for it? I mean, well, as you said before, everyone that's
when you
sick.
meet a particular criteria,
Yeah. Which would be?
fitting into a diagnosis, yes, everybody who fits into that criteria for a particular diagnosis is appropriate for service. But it's generally paid through Medicare, and that Part A. Medi-Cal covers hospice care, and a lot of private insurance as well cover. So, and there are individuals who may not have any access to any type of coverage, and maybe they've fallen through the cracks, and those are always looked at as a non-reimbursable type of care.
To be like the
One that-
homeless?
It could possibly be the homeless, yes, but it's one to look at to see just what the needs are, and if, of course, they fit the criteria, if they can be cared for, and many times they can, and they should be.
Right.
Yeah.
But how would you take care of a homeless person? I mean,
Maybe
they're
there's
homeless.
a particular place that you would meet. Maybe you'd meet in the park. Maybe you would meet at the bus station. And then possibly looking for a place for that individual to reside while their symptoms are changing and maybe they're declining a bit. And then maybe there's a hospice home that they would be able to go and to spend their last days of life.
How would they
as well.
find out about this? I mean, the homeless shelters and that, I mean, do you work with, I would think, the homeless shelters, if that's the case. Does anyone know?
Clinics, maybe they go to a clinic,
A free
in
clinic.
the free clinic in the area, and hopefully they know about hospice services and would recommend that.
Yeah.
Okay. Other comments?
Well, I have to say, there does need to be a lot more knowledge in the community about hospice. I think a lot of people are not aware of it, and I even find in my business when I'm out assessing patients and families, and being able to introduce hospice to them, and a lot of times for most of my clients, it's the first time they've ever heard of such a program.
Why is that? I mean, why is that?
I think one of the reasons is just our own general feelings about it. Even in the healthcare profession, how you feel about it yourself is going to kind of dictate how comfortable you are talking about it to other people. So when you have doctors who are looking at, I want a cure, and we're going to do this and that, they're probably going to be a little reluctant to mention services offered by hospice, not because it's the end of the line for patients, but just because of a fear of that.
Do you think that is, if I say I'm going to enter hospice, I'm thrown in the towel?
Some might feel that way.
It's a misconception.
Yes, I agree.
Depends on.
I don't think we talk about hospice or we learn about it until we're confronted with the issue
Absolutely.
as well.
That's
and all of a
why
sudden,
we have Beyond Bereavement, the power of planning.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
Depends on the relationship that a family has with their own private physician,
Yes.
too, and what sort of message that they have gotten through to him or her about referring to hospice at an appropriate time.
Who makes the referral?
I think that's one of the great misconceptions of hospice, is that if you haven't received a referral from your physician, and maybe you're not strongly connected with your physician, that you can call into any hospice, literally,
Anyone.
and ask to be evaluated. And for all intents and purposes, virtually every hospice in the area, I know First Call does, but we will go out and do a free evaluation just to make sure that you are appropriate, and then we'll act as your advocate to contact the physician and do all those necessary hoops, jump through all those hoops to make sure that we can get you hooked up if that's the
Because
possibility.
we self-referred. We had a good relationship with his medical oncologist, but reached a point, and we were talking, and I said, do you think it's time for hospice? He says, I'll let you make the decision. If that's what you want to do, absolutely, it's time for hospice. But he had to make that decision. And that, because if it's hospice, am I ready to pull the plug? No. He said 6 months, 6 months of unbelievable planning. And when I talk about the planning, Charley, Father Charley here, when I was going through this, it was madness, sheer madness, because I'd never taken care of anyone that was dying. He referred this wonderful book, and Maggie Callahan and Patricia Kelly needs to give me some type of a kickback for this book. It's called Final Gifts. It's a wonderful book. It's based upon observations on the part of different hospice nurses, because you worry about, oh, mother died by herself, you know, am I going to die by myself? Why did my husband, I left the room and then my husband died. It goes through all these different observations, and what I found the book extremely comforting, because even people who weren't believers, they saw visitors and things of that sort. So it really was wonderful. And I had a dear friend who died a year before last, and I gave her the book, and her daughter read the book to her, and she was dying. She found it to be tremendously comforting. So it's a great book. If anyone is dealing with some kind of final day issues, it's a great book for you to look at. Are you familiar with this book?
Very, very familiar.
Yeah, it's great.
yes.
Yeah, it's really great.
One of the other things that you had mentioned, Bea, was that your husband was on service for 6 months.
Right.
And that's one of the other great misconceptions, is that I think people believe that if they're coming onto service that they have to die within that 6 months, or they're going to be taken off of service, and that really isn't the case. People have been on for much longer past that 6 month time frame, but they're constantly being reevaluated to see if they're still appropriate or not. So that's just a misconception.
What's the longest that you've heard of someone on hospice?
Ooh,
Years.
years, yeah.
Years?
Years.
Really? Well, what kind of medical ailment would cause you to be, I guess congestive heart failure,
Congestive
something
heart
like
A
that?
lot
failure.
of chronic illnesses, emphysema, a lot
Sure.
of different chronic illnesses.
Right.
Oh, wonderful.
And that trajectory may take them, they may start at a particular level, but they may not ever come back as high as they once were, because sometimes they have peaks and valleys and flows, and it may not always come back up to that highest level.
What is some, Charlie?
I was just going to follow up on something that Karen had said about nurses having special training. Volunteers have to have training too.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And we go through a 24-hour training course covering all sorts of issues.
Like what?
Well, what is our own relationship to death and dying? What is our
Absolutely.
philosophy of...
Right, because we don't need to come in and hanging up crepe paper or something like that. We don't need that.
That's right.
Boundaries.
Right.
Boundaries.
Yes, and
Boundaries would be very important,
Very
I would think.
how you
Yeah.
deal with people, and some people, after going through the 24 hours, say, "No, maybe I shouldn't volunteer." They
And they
can't.
might be administrative volunteers. There might be
Well,
another avenue
yes,
for them
there are
to
different
help.
kinds of volunteers too. The office volunteers, there's an awful lot of record keeping that needs to be done. I started out taking prescriptions from the pharmacy some
Oh, that's
afternoons.
major.
I was the courier.
Oh, you literally
But
pick them up and drop them off?
and drop them off at patients'
wonderful.
families. And I couldn't believe how grateful people were for this as a service. Because I like to go out.
Well, you're
and I
Mr. Social person.
And I couldn't believe that people wouldn't want to get out. But they're more concerned with staying with their
Yes.
their loved one and making sure that he or she
But
is
also, if you go to
okay.
some of these pharmacies, that they've got the long lines. If your nerves are already raw, you're on edge. It's just like one more thing to
Yes.
push you over the edge.
Yes. So I did that for a couple of years. But that was taken away from Sutter Roseville, at least, as a service, because I think there was fear that we sometimes delivered narcotics.
Oh, so you guys were mules for them or something, right?
Yes.
Because you would, because sometimes morphine and things like that.
Yeah, we
that,
Very
you know,
common.
that's
had to deliver
something to take in
morphine.
consideration.
So, anyway, after that, I switched over to another type of volunteer, serving patients, going to the home and doing whatever they
Respite care.
respite care for a spouse to go out and get her hair done or to get to the bank. One time I had a family and I got the most complex and complete shopping lists
Oh, is it?
and would go to Safeway and get exactly the 6-ounce can of such and such a brand of
Oh.
tuna fish and would bring it home and unload it in her kitchen, and then she would pay me for that. That was another service that they needed. Other people want someone to come in and read to them.
Because it can
Some-
be very isolating. I mean, it can be very, a death can be a very isolating process.
Yes.
For
yes.
caregivers.
For caregivers
Yes.
too, yes.
And sometimes I felt as though I was serving the caregiver
Oh, yes.
more than, and I became much closer to the caregiver than the patient.
Well, it is amazing how comforting it can be for a caregiver. Say, for instance, if the patient has a tendency to want to get up or wants to walk around and maybe is having some safety issues, that volunteer is present so that caregiver can go out and do all the things that he or she needs to do. Go get a haircut.
Or
Go
take
to a
a
doctor's
nap, or
appointment
take a
themselves.
nap.
They can even remain in the home and take a nap. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very
What
valuable.
what I do now is bereavement calls. I'm on a team of 5 people who, with the families, following the family's wishes, like to be called at about 4-month intervals for a year after the patient's death. I've never met these people. I never will, probably. But it's all telephone conversations with them to see whether they are being supported by family or friends, a neighbor, or what is happening with them. I mean, it's sort of sad. Some people are not doing we're not doing anything for Thanksgiving, but others were well taken care of by a son or a daughter, and
Well, again, this is like I tell people, it's their first barbecue. They've never been through this, and family members haven't been through this. They don't know how to support it, and you don't know how to reach out. I mean, you just don't know. But we receive calls from our hospice organization for a year, up until after Rick's death. It was, and I was fine, making my progress, but it was very, very nice to get a call. Well, how you doing? We're just checking in with you. Hopefully you're doing fine. What are your plans for the holidays? If there's anything that we can do, please don't rule out doing some counseling. We do have this available. And they would send like different brochures in the mail and things like that. It was really wonderful. It really was wonderful.
It's a required element of the program. If an agency receives Medicare reimbursement, there is a requirement that there must be 13-month follow-up for bereavement services. So,
wow.
Very important.
Right. And one thing I like about the service too is sometimes there's times when you're not going to be able to meet every need of the patient, pharmacology-wise or things like that, but being able to talk to them is so soothing. I have a message on my voicemail that I have had on my voicemail for now 5 years. And the reason I keep it on there is because it's so encouraging to me. And it was a patient I took care of in hospice. And she called and she was in a lot of distress, had a lot of pain. And whatever we were giving her just didn't seem to work. And so I said, okay, we're going to try something different. Let's do some relaxation things and let's talk. And so we had gone through some things over the phone. And I had her imagining that she's spreading out her arms and opening her hands and just letting all the stress and the pain just, escape her body. And she left me a message on my voicemail saying, you have no idea how much that helped me. And her voicemail was just so wonderful, and it just really pleased my heart so much that I have it to this day.
That's wonderful.
And so there's so many rewards that we're able to do when we're in this type of business.
These telephone calls, I think, are what make me feel that hospice really gets through to people, because they are willing to open up to me, a complete stranger, when I simply identify myself that so-and-so, the social worker, recommended that I give you a call. And I'm following up on his recommendation. How are you doing? What's going on? And people will open up. Complete trust that they have in me as an unknown volunteer.
Complete trust at a time when they're highly vulnerable.
Yes.
You're scared to death. Pardon the pun, but you're scared. You're absolutely scared to death during this particular time. And then you have these visiting angels, to take a term from your business. And really, that's how I felt. The different hospice personnel coming in, they were visiting angels. They really, because they were just so wonderful. My husband was half Native American, and the chaplain that we had, I said, well, I have a minister. Reverend Williams was my minister, so it's like I don't really need spiritual guidance and all that. But I figured, hey, the chaplain came along with the program. I'll just fine, whatever. It's a bonus. She was wonderful. She was very direct, really elegant lady, really cool lady. But what she did is that she played the Native American flute. So she would come to our, what I'm talking about. She would come to our house, and she would make up these beautiful songs and play the Native American flute to my husband. And I can remember the last time that she came in that. And by then he had lost about 100 pounds. And he wasn't in a coma, but he was really very, very quiet. And he wanted the room dark, didn't want any noise. And she came in the dark, sat down cross-legged, and played this beautiful song. And all Rick did, he raised his little bony arm and kind of moaned and said, nice, and then put it down. And then she also graced us at his celebration services for playing the flute also. So it's someone that I look back at my hospice experience and I treasure it. I mean, I don't want to have a hospice experience in the near future, but if I had one, that was similar to the one that we had with Rick, it took the fear out of the whole process. And when we got towards the end, they would tell me step by step, what was going on. And when he went into a coma, the hospice nurse came out and she said, it won't be long. And I was sleeping downstairs with them on the couch. And she says, I need you to kiss him goodbye and go upstairs and let him go. Because when I'd come into the room, he'd become animated. She says, he's trying to stay here for you, but you need to give him permission to go. So they were very, very supportive. And then when he actually died, I called them, and they were there there was someone there within an hour. I mean, they were just, boom, right there, and very, very, they were just wonderful. And then the very next day, the social worker came over and sat down and talked to me and held my hand, and we talked. But it was wonderful because she had told Rick when we first went into the program, she says, Rick, you will teach all of us how to die. And he did. I mean, it was classic, whatever that means, but it was just wonderful. I learned so much about the process, and he was so gallant and just courageous throughout the entire process. So he showed us, I mean, if I could die with an eighth of the amount of dignity and grace that he did, I mean, I would consider myself very, very successful.
One of the other members of the team that we haven't spoken much about is the hospice aide, who comes in once, twice, 3 times a week, maybe a little more if need be, who takes care of the patient's personal hygiene needs. And they are an absolute invaluable member of the team as well. I'm not sure they always get as much credit as some of the other members of the team, but they are absolutely invaluable when we talk about the team concept and supplying comfort for every facet of a human's
I would think
existence.
so, because I would think as a patient begins to lose control, literally and figuratively, of their body and their body functions, it's embarrassing. But it's a lot easier if you have a medical professional to go and clean you up or clean up, spills and things of that sort, which is also easier on the family member.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Even if they want to take a shower still, but they don't have all of the strength to be able to do that, and they need someone there to assist and give that caregiver a break, they are just so important, so important.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to add on hospice? Because what we're going to do, we have an 8-minute video, so don't run and get popcorn or anything. An 8-minute video that we're going to show in a little bit on Clarissa Cook Hospice. And that's a residential facility that I gave a presentation to in Davenport, Iowa. And it's a wonderful presentation because it takes you from the beginning to the end of the whole hospice program. So again, it will reinforce what we have discussed today, but you get that kind of support in a residential facility. Charlie?
I wanted to say one thing to follow up on one of your previous episodes. And it's that when I call a family, let's say 4 months later, after the death, some families are very calm. Others have said, oh, I have spent all of my time going through financial papers which were completely taken care of by my husband. I don't know where this is or where that is. So advanced planning is so important, taking care of things in advance so that the bereaved do not need to go through it.
And again, one of my battle cries, because I have many battle cries, is to the gift that you give your family is advanced planning. So if you have your act together, that you know where your financial papers are, you've done your pre-need, and our next episode is going to be on pre-need planning. Doing all this is not going to speed your death or the death of your loved one, but it's very, very important for you to do this. And if you do this, then what happens? Your family then will have the opportunity, or really have the time, to go through the grieving process, and they're not buried in a mound of paperwork trying to figure out where the checkbook was, and I don't have the passbook for the savings deposit or whatever. These are the things you can do in advance when you're not swimming in a sea of emotion. And so this is a gift that you can give to your family. Well, I want to thank our guests. Is there any parting comments you'd like to make?
For anybody who is appropriate for the services, please don't hesitate to talk to your physician about your needs, or contact the hospice in your area and find out if you're really appropriate or not. It's a benefit. If you're on Medicare, you've already paid for this benefit, and it would be a shame to not use it. It is an entitlement.
Right, and just knowing that there are resources available to help families, to assist with the care of their loved ones, and so.
What I'm going to show you right now is an 8-minute video that I picked up when I was back at the Clarissa Cook Hospice Foundation back in Davenport, Iowa. It's a video that's going to be able to show you the ins and outs of the entire hospice concept. So let's take a look at that.
The Clarissa C. Cook Hospice House is part of the Genesis Hospice program. Hospice House was conceived of by a grassroots effort of volunteers in the community who went to the president of Genesis Health System and made the plea for the Hospice House.
Until the Hospice House was created, the only opportunity that patients had to be treated as an inpatient was in the hospital setting. To be one of the first in the area to build a hospice house really just says that they do care about patients all the way from beginning to end, and that they have the patient's best interest in heart, and this is really where they wanted to go.
It is an honor to be able to provide care for people who are in a situation that they may not at all be ready for, and to help them to meet the goals that they would like to meet before their death. It's a wonderful feeling to know that we can provide that care to people and make such an impact, especially when we only get to do it one time. We get one chance to do it right. We have an interdisciplinary team of staff here at the Hospice House. They are dedicated individuals. They are nurses, nurses' aides,
and the chaplains and the social workers. We have massage therapists that come in, we have volunteers that come in. All of these people play an intimate role in taking care of the patient at the end of life. My job, I think, is to not only care for the patients as a physician, but also to make sure that the care that is being provided here at the Hospice House involves treating that individual with the dignity and respect throughout their care. When patients are here at the Hospice House, they continue to see their primary care doctors. So the doctors that were caring for them at their home or in the hospital continue to see them here at the Hospice House. We feel very strongly that it needs to be that whole team working together. And we meet every week to sit down and talk about how the care is going, if we're providing the care appropriately. Is there something else that we could be doing for that patient? The patients and the families that have had the opportunity to come to the Hospice House have all spoken so highly of the care that they've received. The nurses here are second to none when it comes to the quality of care that they provide.
I've always enjoyed nursing. As I said, I've been a nurse for 43 years, and the drive is that I know that I'm going to make a difference in that person's life today. Each person that comes in here has an individual room. They're large rooms. They look like a bedroom that they may possibly have at home. We're away from the hustle and bustle of acute care in a hospital setting. Here at the Hospice House, we call it a hospice house because we try to make it as close to home as possible.
We have a very calm, peaceful atmosphere. We just keep all the hubbub to a minimum, so it's again very calm and peaceful and quiet here. I visit with every family and or patient here. My job is to see where they are emotionally, help with finances if that's a concern, assess whether they've made funeral arrangements, whether they have advance directives, which is the power of attorney for health care and living will. We do have some people stay here for 1 to 2 days, but we have many other people who are here for months at a time, as long as they qualify for hospice, whether it's 2 or 3 months or 6 months or even longer. We all chose to work here, and we were chosen to work here. I think we are meant to be here, and if you're not meant to be in hospice, you'll find out very quickly. But for the rest of us, it's just something, I guess a calling you could say, that we are supposed to be here working with these families and patients.
I consider it a calling as compared to a vocation. There's no greater joy to me than to be able to be with families and their loved ones that are here at the Hospice House, and just getting to know them, hearing their life stories, being there to give comfort to them, trying to answer questions for them of a spiritual nature. Some of the ways that I do that are that I'd begin talking to people about their life story. And because as people are drawing near to the end of their lives, they want to know that their life has made sense and had purpose and has had meaning. This is one of the most difficult times that a person ever has to face in their life, is when they're losing someone that they love. And if I can be there to support them through that and help them through that and make that any simpler for them, I feel more than happy.
There's not a lot of places out there like this, and especially not in this community, in this area. My job is to recruit, train, and support the volunteers here at the Hospice House to see what the needs are, to provide the extra attention and support for our patients and families and the extra amenities that are part of hospice care.
The services that are provided by the volunteers are absolutely essential, and not only do we see them as important, but they're vital.
Well, one of the most beautiful things that we do here at the Hospice House is after a family has lost someone, we want to show dignity to their loved one as they're being transported from their room out to the funeral vehicle. And what we have here at the Hospice House is in the chapel we keep an entire wall full of quilts that are all handmade that have been donated to the Hospice House to cover the body of their loved one.
Each of our journey quilts has a story that we ask the donor to tell us about, and we do have a photo and the story in a journal here in the chapel, and people can look to see the story as well as feel and touch the quilts.
Our volunteers really are the backbone of the hospice movement and of Genesis Hospice.
Quite frequently we get comments from families that say, we don't know what we would have done without your facility here in the Quad City area.
The physicians and the care providers in the community have seen the quality of care that's provided here at the Hospice House truly is second to none.
It is very gratifying that we help those people when they are most in need.
Oh, I consider it an absolute honor and privilege to be a part of the team caring for patients here at the Clarissa C. Cook Hospice House.
I want to thank you so much for your attendance.
Thank you.
It was very, very informative. Hopefully it was informative to you. Now, my little comment that I want to make to you this week, don't spend a bunch of time telling God how big your storm is. You tell your storm how big your God is, okay? Now, tune in next week because what we're going to be discussing is how to be proactive and to deal with pre-need considerations. We're going to have representatives from East Lawn here to discuss pre-need, and just because you do pre-need doesn't mean you're going to die sooner. Thank you for tuning in. Good night.